Hello, everybody. I'm Grandmaster Boros, and you're watching the Chess Sweep channel. So, today I am going to look through some games of Carlsen and Giri, but mostly concentrating on one game, which was the first game of the last day. And I know that sounds out of context and strange, but it's true. It's one of those games that decided the match. Now, before we get into it, I do have to touch on chess psychology. And if you rewatch all these Chessable Masters interviews, you'll see that this bromance, or so the social media calls it, isn't quite as a big of a like a real romance as it's meant to be. In fact, it is fairly much one-sided. Anish is kind of trying to befriend Carlsen, but Carlsen is keeping his distance. So when Anna Rudolph asked, "So, after this match, do you consider Mr. Anish Giri as your main rival?" he got a prompt response of no by Magnus Carlsen. And I'll tell you the story about this, and I'll tell you why Carlsen is so on point. And he's communicating about this Carlsen versus Giri kind of dilemma or bromance. So he knows that he lives rent-free in Giri's head. And as we're going to see in this match, you're going to see what happened. Stochastic chess and Giri played well. Well, yeah, just wait for it. Now, Giri does play really good chess. However, from a psychological perspective, he is the underdog. He often gets into situations where he's just defeated mentally. Not on the board, not on chess terms, but by pure psychology. So when I come back to the theme of Anna Rudolph again asking whether he is considered to be a rival for Carlsen, Carlsen says no, flat out no. And what that actually means is, I'm not going to acknowledge you, you still will have to prove yourself. And I think Anish has kind of a skewed perception of Magnus, because he believes whatever Magnus does. He doesn't believe that Magnus can blunder. And the first blunder is to believe that there are forces that are unpenetrable. But in fact, there are ways to crash on through. Hey there, people. Hey, Sumik. Hey, Fuxia, Vornaki. And what is kind of an interesting factor. For this one, I'm going to give you one example, and then we're going back to that other game that I wanted to show, which will be the main topic. So don't expect like a very long stream here. We're going to focus on some of the games, a bit of psychology, and how did they make the preparation for that crucial game that Carlsen eventually won, and won in the first round. So let's take a look at that study, Carlsen Giri. Now first off, I want to add a new chapter, and this was between Giri and Carlsen. And this will be a bit retrospective. Carlsen is after a win, the win that we're going to take a look at later. So here, Carlsen is playing the Grunfeld. Knight c3, d5, takes, knight takes, bishop d2. Nothing to look at, it's standard stuff. e4, takes, takes, c5, d5, castles, knight f3, e6, bishop c4, takes, 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 knight d7, queen d2, knight b6, castles, bishop e6. And here comes the critical moment. Anish probably was surprised yet again by Magnus. Probably have never seen bishop e6 before, so kind of expected it to be preparation. Now here comes psychology. If you believe your opponent, you're not going to look for refutations. But in chess, it's unlike poker, it's very hard to bluff. You can bluff. However, if your opponent puts his mind to it, it should give you a solution. So let's try to figure out what Carlsen could have faced and probably would have lost the game almost on the spot. Bishop e6 was not a good move. In fact, if you watch the replays, Carlsen was really happy not to see the move that Giri just did not play. Fuchs is saying Giri saw the correct move earlier but missed it in this situation, so did Swidler. Now, this is one of the big dilemmas in chess. There are two types of players. One of them are the practical players. They look for solutions. And the other ones prepare ideas. So Giri is in the half of preparing ideas. So what that means is he looks for solutions before the game and not as much focused on finding direct solutions in the mortem, in the moment, that is. And in fact, I think Giri fell into the trap, and meanwhile you guys did find the correct move, which is queen h6, which Giri didn't play. Now, if you ask me, and if you ask most of the strong players, would you consider a queen h6? You'd say yes, of course, and I don't believe that Giri didn't look at it. However, there's this trust issue between Giri and Carlsen. Giri trusts Carlsen and not the other way around. Giri believes that Carlsen knows what he's doing all the time. And it turns out, maybe not always. Maybe not always. And actually that comes up in a different rivalry, namely between Carlsen and Kramnik. So they used to be rivals. Kramnik was the world champion. Kramnik had like a dominating performance versus Carlsen in the early years. And Carlsen slowly understood that he's been bluffed. Not once, not twice, a lot of times. So then he realized he cannot continue that disbelief. He has to take on Kramnik and try to refute all of his ideas. Yep, that's the point. Exactly. If queen f6, which is the right move there. Knight g5, you're setting up mate. Queen g7, takes, bishop takes e6. And sadly, for Carlsen, f takes e6 runs into knight e6, fork. There's also this last try of h6, trying to double attack, but this fails to knight takes f7, where you're down in exchange, so I've got a rook against the knight, which is traditionally considered to be lost, especially as Giri would get the open file. So this is one of those bluffs. And it is shocking that Giri didn't go for it. Because once you get a high FIDE rating, you can really tell one thing. You can solve it. Chess is solvable. Now it takes some time, but you can do it. And in this specific case, this wasn't actually that hard to play queen h6. He played bishop takes e6, and the game later on ended in a draw. It was played, and the game ended in a draw later. Bishop takes e6 takes, bishop takes f7. And there's another idea and concept that really has to be answered here. So everybody knows how Carlsen plays chess. Can anybody sum it up? I'm curious if you guys know how Carlsen plays chess in recent years. You might have actually noticed. It is a variation. Stochastic chess. It is a variation. That's why they played that way. I mean, risk-taking wise. So we're kind of in game theory at the moment. We're not talking chess, Neil Deal. We're talking game theory. So is Carlsen a risk-taker at the moment? Not really. Carlsen isn't a risk taker. So, in this sense, bishop e6 was an interesting move. So, I think I even dare to give it an interesting sign. For the fact that Giri doesn't expect Carlsen to blunder. 2, he seems to be risk averse. So, he's looking for chances and trying to avoid complications. So we can say it seems like Giri was afraid of Carlsen or under pressure. Well, you have both. It's basically the finals. Now, Giri wants to be like Carlsen, and he kind of idolizes him. So he has a choice. He can take on e6, queen d2, and bishop takes f7, winning a pawn, and get into an endgame where he has no chance of losing. Or can go queen h6, which is somewhat more risky. And luckily for Carlsen, as a big fan Giri is, he goes for the risk-free solution. And in chess, you can't really choose one path and roll with it. Sometimes you've got to go all the way the other direction and become a tactician, which he actually tried in the last game, but it actually didn't work. Was very close, gave us super close of equalizing. Bishop b7 is also winning a pawn, but it gives compensation. So takes, rook b8, and even though you took it, these pieces are going to lurk around. Welcome, Chess Medic, Marmanu. Thank you for the follow. So the biggest problem was that Giri did not feel that this is the moment to strike. However, nobody ever tells you when to strike. You need to check options. But okay, this happens. This definitely happens. Sometimes we do miss critical moves. However, this was kind of that example of completely believing Carlsen. Didn't know MVL had a Twitch channel? How dare you didn't know? You should know that. Anyways, This was the first example that I wanted to show. Now there's the other game that will be our topic, and that's the first game of that last round day. Now, most of you know about a supercomputer that is beloved by the media and the chess community. Can anybody remind me the name of that chess computer? Who played, I think, Stockfish? Alpha, yes, Asha, exactly. Now, excitingly enough, all these ideas that we're going to say in this game was played by a computer in 1969. Shocking, isn't it? And that computer role played as Lev Polugayevsky. Now, Lev Polugayevsky, if you didn't know, is a famous Soviet grandmaster who actually invented a famous pawn sacrifice, borrowed by Mr. Alpha. E6, D5, C5. Now this line actually had a renaissance. This was brought back by Kramnik in the recent years. But was part of the repertoire of many, many strong players. This is called the semi-Tarrasch. Always considered to be fairly solid, but in later times they kind of found a way to kind of breach through. Let's take a look. C takes d5, knight takes d5, e4 takes, b takes c3. Just to test your history knowledge, I will have you a question. Who is that famous grandmaster who's always sacrificing pieces and then winning? Misha Tal, of course. Also, I'm happy that you guys passed the reading comprehension test, because right there you can see the name of Michal Tal. Oh, not the tools. We need other tools, not that one. Tal is right there. I'm proud of all of you. Any case, it's very interesting to see Michal Tal playing such a solid system against Lev Polugayevsky. Now, if you think about Lev Polugayevsky is a grandmaster, a Soviet grandmaster who was known for hard work. So you'll see that hard work eventually bores fruit. So in this sense, he's a lot like Anish Giri. Both of them like working off the board. But I'm talking too much. Let's get into the game. CD, CD, bishop b4 takes castles, bishop c4, and this is the main line tabia, knight c6. Now in the other game that we're going to see between Giri and Carlsen, they played knight d7 and b6, and that's kind of the new hype, trying to avoid the troubles that actually Tal will face. Zero space chess says all the others were famous slackers. And that's funny that you say that. In fact, Karpov was famous to play many card games, poker, ping pong, even tennis, and just playing blitz at times to practice openings. So whenever you think about famous slackers, there are quite a few of them at the highest level. Now Hikaru plays you online, but don't make a mistake there. He's actually working at home and offline when he's not playing you. Ariane, thank you for the follow. So knight d7, b6 is going to be seen, but the original main line was knight c6, castle b6. So first off, whenever we look at this position, we've got to identify the problems. What does this position resemble mostly? The Grunfeld, yes. This is a typical Grunfeld structure with Grunfeld type of themes. Grunfeld type of themes means that eventually this d-pawn might make a run for it. However, oftentimes black would try to block it. So let's say d5, e takes d5, e takes d5, knight a5. So the knight usually is not good on the rim, but it actually wins time here, so it's fairly useful. Say bishop d3. And here you should find that all critical move for black. One of the staple of the Grunfeld and the semi-Tarrasch. Black to move. I'm gonna even rotate the board because it's important. It's so much different when you look at it from the black perspective. Now first off, there's this menacing pawn on d5. We've got to block it, right? Now, knight b7, knight d6 is an idea. However, you leave this square open. Now, if you're wondering why you can't take on d5, it's because of bishop h7 check, takes, and queen takes d5, and you lose the queen. Otherwise, you will have to face the wrath of that knight on c6. That's why queen d6 is such a strong move here, blocking this pawn on d5. So that is kind of that basic principle. As black, sort of a Grunfeld player, you want to play queen d6 and blockading that pawn. Why is this such a great choice and beloved by everybody? Well, yes, white will get a strong passer and some threats on the king. However, if that boils down to nothing and it's not a mating attack, there'll be a d5 pawn weakness. That is something to keep in mind. So, if you're new, do you guys know what happened in 1969 in the chess world? This is, by the way, a match from 1969. Aram, thank you for the follow. The candidates matches. Now, candidates matches don't happen anymore, but candidates matches were important. They decided who's going to challenge the reigning world champion. So this match between Polugayevsky and Tal was part of that series. So they played a series of games even longer than Giri played Carlsen. So they played minimum 12 games or even more. And the earlier times they played even more. So they had ample time to prepare. Also, they usually went to some kind of resort like Curacao and they spent months playing. I'm not joking, months and months preparing, and they even took off days like they were at work. But you'll see, literally, Polugayevsky was working on this one. Thank you guys for the follows. Let's get back to this position. So if you look at this one, the first thing I would notice is that white is the one having the central control. Black barely holds back those pawns from roll-up. However, just like in the Grunfeld, there are some counterplays. Mostly, you will have targets on e4. Rook d1. Very nice move by Polugayevsky, preparing that d5 break. And that makes it sort of special. You want to prepare these ideas. Bishop b7. Let's try to guess the second move by Lev Polugayevsky. Just think about it. These guys, Polugayevsky, Giri, they love to prepare their concepts. So what could have been Polugayevsky's next move? So eventually, that is true, Neil Deal, you want to play for d5. But probably that wouldn't be the right time. You want to prepare that concept. Therefore, Polugayevsky played Rook e1. And these are those little moves that some of the beginners don't appreciate, but Super Grandmaster note that it's very important. You're not playing d5 just yet, but you note that once, let's say, black plays h6, d5, takes e takes d5, that rook is already on an open file. So you're waiting for the right time to open it up. Now, if black is overreacting with knight e7, for example, you do not have to play d5 right away. So in fact, this is kind of a shadow boxing move. You're preparing an idea, but not showing your cards with an immediate d5. Like if knight e7, you can just get that knight into the central square of e5, and you're enjoying your time because knight e7 didn't really set up any threats. That's why rook e1 is such a great move. Rook e1, knight a5. So Tal is kind of feeling the danger. So he's trying to chase away this bishop and exerting more pressure on the d5 square. Bishop d3, rook c8. And here comes the big question. What to do? What to do? Black has a lot of control over that critical square on d5. White has a beautiful center, so even if you don't find any moves for white, you can claim a symbolic advantage, space. However, the 1969 Alpha Zero of that time, that is Lev Polugayevsky, didn't come empty-handed for this game. What did Lev Polugayevsky play here? Now I tell you a little bit of a story. So, as you know, these big matches don't happen without seconds. Seconds are those helpers, just like you see in Tour de France. They're riding along with you and give you some extra help. Now in chess, it's exactly the same thing. You have a dude who comes there and checks if everything's alright with your preparation and ideas. So at this moment, one of those great guys actually joined Polugayevsky and noticed something on the board. His name was Yefim Geller. Yefim Geller noted that he's seen this exact position in that preparation that Polugayevsky had. Note that they didn't have computers at that moment. They've been working off on the side with wooden boards, preparing for the grand idea. So Geller said, okay, so he's preparing the semi-tarosh, which we are looking at right now. And he goes into the playing hall, as they usually did when there were no unfortunate situations and lockdowns. And to his astonishment, he sees exactly the same position on the chessboard what he saw on the wooden set of Polugayevsky's. He anticipated all of those moves. All of them. Hello there, people. And indeed, here comes Lev Polugayevsky's bombshell, d5. A brilliant move by Polugayevsky. What makes this brilliant? Well, by in itself, it's just giving up a pawn. Black obviously has lots of pressure on the d5 square, so he took. But this is just the beginning. E takes d5, but because e takes d5 wouldn't be such a big deal. E takes d5, we in fact know why e takes d5 is not such a great move. How would e takes d5 would be reacted to? Now you don't want to take on d5 just yet, because you run into some tactical tricks. However, as you all remember, this position's a lot Grunfeldy or Grunfeld-like. And if you know that this position is very Grunfeld-like, then you might even note what should be Tal's move in case of e takes d5. So the Grunfeld, are we scared of that d5 pawn? Hello there, people. Welcome, newcomers. So are we scared of that d-pawn? It's actually a yes and no question. I know, we can give elaborate chess moves and chess notations, which is fine with me. I'm not against chess notations. However, you can just tell me if you like it or you don't. Meaning, are you especially scared of that Freddy on d5 or not? Well, that d-pawn turns out to be dangerous, and is always dangerous whenever you play the Grunfeld, and because the semi-tarosh is sort of similar, do want to stop this pawn from getting to d7, because once it gets to d7, there might be a new lady joining the forces. So seeing that, Black's next move is obvious and critical. Queen d6. You block it. You always want to block the d pawn. Now, in some ways, chess is a lot like boxing. You want to have a steady target. You don't want this d pawn to move around. So just like in boxing, you fix it, and then you mount pressure and punches on that d5 pawn. Never forget that. It's a very important concept. fix the target, and then start packing those punches. So seeing that, Lev Polugayevsky, aka the human mastermind, played e5, which is quite a brilliant concept. So let's observe. What did White accomplish with this e5 move? Well, first off, this bishop suddenly has a clear target on h7. That's one of those deals. What else? Why doesn't e5 work immediately without giving up the pawn? Asha's asking, and there comes the answer by Jim Walker. And I can tell you that is the reason. So if you play e5 now, this bishop will be very active. In fact, would eliminate that knight. And again, black could blockade these pawns with a good counterplay for black. However, as Jim Walker points out, d5 takes e5. Now that bishop is stuck on b7. And it can't do anything. You can't really shoot through that pawn. That's illegal. So seeing that, there is an idea that makes a lot of sense. So Ash is saying d4. In fact, d4 would be an idea that I think is reasonable. Playing d4 and activating the bishop. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Giving up the pawn and get this active. Note that you're actually sacrificing the pawn back, because if I take, there's bishop takes h7 and I take on d4. However, Tal is a sharp player. He is curious to know how truthful and how good is Lev Polugayevsky's preparation. Knight c4. So White has compensation. White has pressure on the king side and a strong e5 pawn. However, they just attacked our queen. We've got to devise a plan now. Let's think about that for a second. What plan can we use here? Or what should be our grand plan in this position? Obviously, we do have to take care of that lady on d2. That is a given, especially in this super grandmaster level that is Lev Polugayevsky and Michal Tal. So queen f4, of course, but what is the point of queen f4? And that's kind of like the big deal and things that we have to know whenever we choose a concept. When Polugayevsky gave up this pawn, he didn't just say, okay, my queen was under attack, what to do, I'll play queen f4. He definitely had a strict idea in mind. What is his plan? Definitely there are some tactical solutions. Any other plans? Good old battery? Like which one, Warnaki? So we already got the suggestion of taking takes knight g5, which is very interesting and is casually known as the Greek gift. That's one way of playing. Queen f5, I guess, is the one that Warnaki is referring to, attacking on h7. Or you could even go this h4, h5, h6 idea, which is a deep plan. In fact, such a deep plan, we actually have that featured on our YouTube channel. It's called The Legendary Pawn. So you could even think about h4, h5, h6, trying to undermine that g7 square and set up some mating thoughts and plans. How to deal with knight b2. Hello, Quantizator. Knight b2 was played by Michal Tal. And here comes the big question. What to do now? Both the bishop and the rook is attacked. But strikes down the big Lev. Leo Polugayevsky is going to show his true preparation. And he's going to be the forerunner of these engines. And mind you, this game was played in 1969. So all that Polugayevsky had is his own brains and seconds. So whenever you're looking for tactical ideas, you first have to think about how many defenders does Mishatal have on the king side. One rook. Exactly. So yeah, that is the big question there, Asha. After the Greek gift, the king could just go to g6, right? So maybe that doesn't really work, right? It just doesn't look good. Just doesn't feel right. Not at all. Now, as I told you guys earlier on, chess, there's only one person you can trust, and that's you. Nobody else. You can only trust yourself. Your opponent is trying to trick you. It's one of the things that happen. And whatever I say doesn't really matter. If you want to go for the Greek gift, go for the Greek gift. And so did Polugayevsky. Boom! Bishop takes h7. Now you can't really wait around too much, because then black can play h6, stop this knight g5 jump, and eventually that extra pawn will tell. And even give it back at the right moment, and Tal is probably just going to have a good old time. Bishop takes h7 was played. King takes, knight g5 check, king g6. Now if king g8, we still have to figure out the way to refute king g8. Again, a side note for those who haven't joined just yet and are new. So what is surprising that all of these ideas has already been on Polugayevsky's board before the game. So this is still home preparation for Polugayevsky versus Tal. So king g8, how can we finish off Misha Tal with a splendid attack? Which might sound surprising. Usually it is Tal who checkmates. Okay, queen h4. I play rook e8. Hey, Brian. So in these critical positions, what matters most is to come up with a plan. You can't play both queen f5 and queen h4. You've got to choose. Hello there. Oh, people. Well, Itai, that variation you showed is interesting because queens don't move in L shape. Sometimes I also imagine things, but queens usually don't do that. So the reason I'm giving you guys a bit of time to think about it is that you only have one move in chess. You've got to feel the weight of that. It's all about decisions. So queen h4 won. Now queen f5 was second as an option, but the problem with queen f5 is that black can go g6, and when you would go queen h3, go for that mate, suddenly the knight on g5 is just dropping. Go here, boom, I take it, you're done. Not that queen f5 is a bad idea, but sadly we don't have a pawn there just to defend that knight, so then we could go for that checkmate. After g6, that's a target. Therefore, we're left with either e6 or queen h4. Now e6 would force matters. It's not necessarily a bad move, but why would you want to show your hands when you can set up mate in 1? So whoever said queen h4, you're correct. You want to keep e6 as an option, or maybe just mate in 1. Mate in 1 is always good. So if f6, then we checkmate. King cannot run away. Therefore, the only move is rook e8. Now, Itai mentioned check here, and queen f7, but that is something that you often fall into. Sadly, that's not a checkmate, because the queen can't really go that direction. It can only take on g7, and the attack is still pretty big, but there's an even stronger solution here. And you guys find it. It's very pretty. Not that queen h7, queen h8, queen g7 is not a good way of continuing. Now it happens. Believe it or not, Itai, when grandmasters play on a wooden set over the board, they also have these chess blindnesses and these moments that they miss it. They just miss it. They just calculate so many moves ahead that they miss that there's some pieces in front of it. So it happens. No worries there. Now, we know that there's queen h7 check, but there's one thing that you never should forget when you're playing this game of chess, and that is your opponent's threats. What is your opponent planning to do? And these are key moments. You always have to be conscientious of the fact that your opponent isn't just playing there and using chess as an alibi for something. They're there to beat you. So the threat is knight takes d1. And sometimes it's good to notice your opponent's threats because we're going to ignore it. Big time. With e6. e6. And sadly for black, knight takes d1 runs into this glorious checkmate. E takes here, and you're not even going to take anything on e8. You're going to play queen h8 and it's mate. They have 7 pawns defended, the king cannot go to the g7 square, and it's a mate with you being down a bishop and a rook, but you still can't help it. So e6. But the last question is, how is Tal going to succumb to the attack after f takes e6? You are right, Max Koenig. So f takes e6, and here comes the big question. How to crash on through. How can you better yourself as a chess player? Benny, try to win this position. That's how you get better. So doing chess puzzles is like going to the gym for a regular bodybuilder. Here you're actually training yourself to become a good calculator. So Benny, you came at the right time, the right moment. It is time for you to shine. Try to find the right move here for white. So is there a checkmate? Can white checkmate here? That's the first thing you should ask yourself. Can I give a checkmate? Is it possible? Is it possible to give checkmate? So chat, I'm going to ask you to say yes if you believe there's mate, or no if you don't believe there's a mate. I only want to see yeses and nos. No talk, just no and yes. All right, let's see. So some blabbery, blab, blab. No mate, says Green Pickle. Asha, Itai saying no. Brezhir says there is checkmate. Lyrical Chess says yes. Gaborovich speaks a foreign language that I understand, meaning yes. Itai saying yes. Benny says yes. Jim Walker says yes. Okay, so let me count that. Yoneticon says no. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 no's. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses. Can anybody tell me how to win without checkmating? Probably you're right. Mating in 30 and 40 move doesn't count. Yep, you can just win the queen. So check here. Now, there would be a mating concept, just as we've seen before. If there would not be an e-pawn there, like there's no e-pawn, king f8, queen h8 is checkmate. So as we've seen in the previous example, this checkmates. So if there's this e7 square covered by the rook, it's checkmate. However, in case of f takes, check, king f8, check, here, if you take on e6, you're just barely missing out on checkmate, as these guys are going to over-defend that square, and this terrible bishop turns out to be useful, defending that critical square on d5, so you can't play rook d5 trying to win the queen. I believe you, chat. Probably Neil said it first. Now, in this case, king e7, queen takes g7 as Neil said, king d6, and knight f7 is forking. The winner move, spotted by Neil Deal. Sweet. So sometimes we're sad because we can't checkmate, and in that circumstances you take the queen. That's what you do. Now knight e4 check, by the way, is a tricky choice, but king c6 is the only one you can't take because you're pinned, and they'd call the arbiter if you dare take on e4. So here, and the king just runs away. And probably you're not winning as easily as you would with knight f7. Okay, Itai, you also get the credit. Alright, so we found out the way that king g8 is losing. King h6, you run into knight f7 and more forks. You're just going to lose. So king g6 is the only way to go. But believe it or not, Pologaevsky knew that this could happen. He expected this one. So king g6, in fact, this sets up a double threat. Not only does this knight hang on g5, there's also knight d1. The question is, which one are we going to sacrifice? And why? Now, this game is actually very important because this is closely related to the game of Carlsen and Giri. All the concepts that Carlsen will be using is straight from this game from 1969. 1969, a long time ago. Yet Polugayevsky is still relevant to this day in chess circles. So sometimes do look at games of these fabulous players from the past because they knew what they're doing, unlike some players at the moment. Occasionally, some know what's up, like Carlsen does. And anyways, let's try to figure out this one first. Should sacrifice the rook. Well, you could maybe try rook e3, but as far as I can see, I can sacrifice my queen. Could maybe go f6, takes, and I start counting. And two pieces, so a knight and a bishop and a rook, is worth exactly the value of a queen. So rook e3, even though is a very creative idea, it just doesn't work. So the big move here is h4. But we've got to answer what will happen in case of knight takes d1. That is the question, people. So let's try to figure this one out. Also, don't forget to calculate. Don't use that metal thingy that is right in front of you. Use your brains. Lev Polugayevsky did too and found a solution. That's why we came up with this idea of h4. So be back in a second. Meanwhile, try to solve it. Wow. So I can see Itai is doing the home assignment alone. Now, the point is the following. h5 check. You've got to do something, otherwise you're down a rook, a bishop, and just completely lost. So you've got to go for the attack immediately. h5. Now if king h6, then you can go knight e6 and just winning the queen. Or just go for checkmate. Wait, so you can even go that way. Wait, no, just knight f7. Here I actually run into g5. Or I can just take. That's also winning. Or can take on f7 first and win that way. Wait, knight f7 actually is bad because king h7 and the king runs away. But knight e6 wins because g5 I have h takes g6 and the queen is dropping. Not to mention the fact that your king is still in danger. So king takes h5 is the only move. But now we've got to find the right solution here. g4 has to win, Asha. Material count at the end. we have too many pieces. I mean, that extra queen goes a long way, quantizator. So here, and the big move is g4. This is the big move. This king was surprisingly away from all those dangers. However, after g4, it can't escape its wrath. King g6. Now, white is checkmating. Let's try to find this one. This is actually gorgeous. This is gorgeous. So Asha, you're on the right path. Continue. So queen f5 check obviously is the first move. How do we continue? Where will we have the mate? On h5, right, quantizator? So queen f5 check. Here, knight f7 check. You can't go anywhere. My queen blocks all those squares. Rook f7 and queen h5 is mate. And you have a rook and a bishop and a knight, yet you get mated by a lone queen, which is astounding. I actually like this mate the most. So h5, if king h4, then there's this very nice backwards move of knight f3 check here and queen g3. And you can also just win the same way. And knight e6 check is also just completely winning after king h6, running into all sorts of tricks. Again, this is very pretty. So he actually didn't go that direction. So Tal didn't go this way. He played rook c4. But we've got to check for f5 for a second, because this one's a very beautiful idea. And here's the move rook d4. Can anybody tell me what's the point of rook d4 here? All this because of the Greek gift, right, Max Koenig? So the point is, after rook c4 trying to exchange, it's actually a bit too late. In fact, white is in due time to checkmate again with pawns and queen. As Itai also points out in Zero Space Chess, h5. If you go here, I can go knight e6 and win the queen. If king h5, then I have queen h4 check. Here, queen h7 check takes f4, king g4. That square is covered, the rook is defending the f4 pawn, and queen h3 is checkmate. And what's really astounding, that Pologaevsky has had this at his home, preparing for this match, which makes it fantastic. So let's go back. Rook c4, h5, king h6, knight f7, queen f5, king g8, e6. Crazy that this pawn is super fast. There's still threats there. In fact, if you move away, I take on d8, here play e7, and my pawn is unstoppable. Because the rook can't cover that square, the knight is blocking it. You can go rook f8, but then you lose all of your stuff. You lose the rook and the bishop, and you're just completely hopelessly lost. So e6, queen f6, takes, rook d2, and we're probably not going to look through the whole game. You will be able to find it in the study that I will add to you guys later on. But rook d2 here is kind of the winner concept, because after knight a4, there's a very nice little quiet or silent move, as we say in chess, which is winning the game. That is knight d6. And the problem is, if you go rook c7, I go e7, and you can't stop my e-pawn from promoting. And that's kind of the whole deal and excitement about this whole variation. Lev Bologaevsky had this on his board, preparing for this. So he knew that this is going to happen, and as Geller pointed out, it actually turned out to be part of chess history, and this preparation worked out. So again, that's why I wanted to show you guys this important concept of d5, e takes d5, e5, as it will make a guest appearance pretty soon in the other match. And that other match is Carlsen Giri. So people tell you oftentimes that you don't need to remember the past. But in chess, in fact, it very much depends how deep is your knowledge of chess history. Chess was played for hundreds and hundreds of years, and there were big upticks in this period, especially in 1969. This preparation was spot on, in a very fine work by Pologaevsky, even used by computers. Not to mention the fact that another pawn sacrifice with d5 in the Nimzo-Indian was used by a computer. And Lev Pologaevsky is never mentioned. In fact, he was the innovator who came up with this pawn sacrifices. In any case, let's take a look now at this game played by Carlsen and Giri. So this was the first game of the last round match, c5. Earlier on, they played a Ragozin, but this time he's going, that is Anish Giri, going for the semi-Tarash. Now the semi-Tarash is tricky. It can be really bad, as we've seen it before, and it can be really good if you manage to survive the attack. c5, c takes, e4, takes, check, in d2, castle, knight d7. Now this is the new meta. Everyone's playing with this knight d7 way of playing, trying to avoid getting hit by this move of d5. So if you go d5, you can take, and knight f6, attacking both the pawn and the bishop, and with every exchange, the situation gets much more better for black, that is, for Giri. So he castles b6. So if you recall the game that we just looked at, where should white put his rooks, her rooks? What does the bishop do on c4? It actually supports the break with d5. You want to create a passed pawn, and that's the main goal of this whole line, Asha. There are many options here, quantizator. You can go here, here, you can go rook d1, rook e1. The question is, which is better? That is the big question. See e1, d1 on first place. Why would we want those rooks on e1 and d1? Well, Itai, in fact, you should think, because it's a serious decision. If you get that rook on c1, probably you are going to plan to play on the c file. If you put the rook on d1, you are attempting to open up the position with d5. So with every move, you make a decision. Doesn't rook e1 solve the problem of the hanging pawn? Yes, it does make a good point there, right? Rook d1, should be 7, rook e1. And you might think it's a coincidence, but it ain't. In fact, the truth is, these players are familiar with that Pologaevsky-Tal game. So Carlsen consciously puts this rook on d1 and e1, supporting this d-pawn and defending the e4 pawn. Rook c8, bishop b3. So you could go bishop d3, but then you wouldn't have this idea of playing d5. Rook e8, rook e3, knight f6, and now watching and seeing that previous game that we looked at will be much easier to tell what is the move that Carlsen played here. Well, it's always a question of intuition versus calculation, Itai. And it's always a personal choice, although you can always better yourself and better your calculation skills. d5, boom. Now d5 is a much easier move to make if you know the Pologaevsky-Tal game from 1969. If you didn't know that game, you wouldn't know it. J-Walt Scott, hello there. So in fact, this one had a predecessor. And it doesn't kind of devalue it, but it's kind of interesting to note how these building blocks of knowledge helps either the second, that is Peter Heine Nielsen, to come up with a new idea, or Carlsen to come up with this concept of sacrificing the same exact way with d5, e5, but in a different move order and in a somewhat different situation. Krishna is saying, thank you for showing the other games, Danish. I hadn't known of that game prior to the lecture. I'm happy that now I opened up your eyes. So Quantizator has a great point. On the C file, if we would have put this rook on the C file, instead of d1, it would be exchanged off. And as black has less space, every exchange favors black. On the D and E file, they can be used further along the way to go for that direction. Correct. So he takes d5, e5. Now you can play e5 here, by the way, with black. However, that has a downside. Can anybody tell me what is the downside of playing e5? Now, there's a positive. You're not going to get into those complications that Giri faced. However, it has a drawback. Now that bishop on b7 is terrible. It's kind of staring at an iceberg. can't really pass on through. That's one thing. That bishop is dead forever. Number two, you created a passer for white, which will be very useful in the upcoming times and moves. Also, this knight can put pressure on that e-pawn later on. So e5 is the move you wouldn't want to ever make, because in that case, you're giving a free hand for white, and if anyone asks you who's better with in this position, only look at the center and see who has more pieces there. Well, it's clearly white. White has 2 pawns in the center to black's only one, that is on e5. It is very much like a Grunfeld position. Correct, Krishna. So, from a positional standpoint, as we call these positional advantages, Giri decided to go for it. And I do give full credit for taking on d5, because you want to challenge your opponent. e5, and this is very much similar to what happened in the previous game. Now, here comes the big question. Where would you put this knight on f6? Let's think about that one. And whenever you see Giri and these super grandmasters waiting and thinking in these positions, they're pondering where to put the knight. And I will explain to you why he made the decision and what other decisions he could have made. So obviously he can go to e4 as he did in the game. So the options are the following. You can go e4, d7, or maybe even knight g4. Knight g4 is not a completely out of this world idea. However, it has a downside, which I'll explain in a second. e4 most active. Now, I'll tell you how I think. So I would definitely think, okay, knight e4 looks very good. However, as you learn from super grandmasters, if you see a good move, look for a better one. So even if you decide that, okay, knight e4 should be the best, it does not mean that objectively knight d7 or knight g4 can't be a counter argument or a better solution. So in fact, chess is a lot like problem solving. You want to solve the problem. And just because some of them look appealing to the eye doesn't mean it's great. Thank you for the follow. So knight e4 does look good and appealing to the eye. However, it doesn't mean it's the best. I'm kind of sad you guys only mentioned knight e4. That wasn't by far the only option. So knight e4 was played. But for example, knight g4 is not out of this world, for example. And even though this knight is a bit shaky, and probably that's why I would reject it, and Giri rejected it as well, because yes, you put pressure on e5 and the rook, but after I move away my rook, I can just kick this knight away and it has to go to the rim. Therefore, it got rejected. However, there's also this idea of a knight d7. Can anybody tell me what could be the point of knight d7? It is relative, what you call ample time spent or not. But in fact, knight d7 has a point. Nuno, thank you for the follow. So knight d7 accomplishes something that knight e4 does not. Puts pressure on e5. And you'll see in a split second why does that matter. If you take on d5, that's actually not a big deal. You remember, black got that extra pawn. He takes d5. After knight d7, he's just basically just giving back the pawn. But if takes, queen takes d5, knight c5, and black is actually doing good. You can't even avoid the exchange, so you can't drop back to c4. The rook is hanging on d1. So in fact, knight d7 would have that point of giving back the pawn, but hoping to activate his pieces while kind of holding back the opponent. Could also go knight c5, knight e6. However, the big dilemma is bishop a4, and it's a good question whether white has enough play there for the pawn. But just for example, that extra pawn doesn't always mean a lot when your bishop is shut in and can't really pass through. That bishop is actually struggling over there. On the other hand, it is an extra pawn. Probably Giri didn't go for this line, seeing that there is a strategic danger of having a really bad bishop versus a strong knight on d4. Knight e4, king e1, king c7, knight d4. Now knight d4 is a very strong move. And that is kind of the reason I'm wondering if knight d7 was a better move than knight e4 was. Let me track back a little bit. So if knight d7, you can't even think about knight d4, you lose the e5 pawn. There's immediate pressure right there. So knight e4, but this does allow knight d4. This pawn is taboo because if you take, I've got a little nasty move that would just wrap the game up. Chat, can you find this sneaky little move that goes all along the way and wins it? Of course, f3. And now you can't move the knight because you lose the rook. So there are these little tricks that you've got to keep in mind. You're looking at that. So possibly here, Giri should have gone knight c5, putting pressure on that bishop, knight d4, and kind of anticipate that white is going for f4 and go for queen g5 with some counterplay. Because yes, white is never really worse because that bishop is just too bad. It can't move and it's mostly useless, apart from defending that pawn. But after queen g5, there's some pressure on e5, and queen g5 also stopped this expansion of f4, f5, which is critical in that situation. But after queen c7, there's this strong move of knight d4, preparing this idea of f3 and f4. a6, h4. Similar? Looks familiar from the previous game? Well, it should. All these d5, e takes d5, e5 concepts and this h4 move, which is all the hype these days already, yet again, just kind of undermining that king. Also takes away this sort of maneuver from Giri. He can't go that way because that h4 pawn is stopping that. Note that Giri just doesn't have enough, can't take still because f3 is coming. Rook d8, f3, Knight c5, h5. So let's stop right here and observe. What did white achieve, and what are the big issues that they're having with black? King Crusher, thank you so much for the raid of 50. Appreciate it. Hope you had a good time. Also, shout out to King's Crusher. You're just looking at this Brilliancy by Magnus Carlsen on the last day. So what did white achieve from a positional standpoint? And why is black struggling so much? Well, black is struggling a lot because of these pieces being so passive. Some of them do put pressure on that e5 pawn, but that's kind of the only thing that you can see. That's kind of the problem with these pieces, the queen and the rooks. What else? What are the other things that black is struggling with? Black seems to be just reacting to white, that's true. What else? There's a critical piece. Without that, black would be fine. But because it's on the board, Giri is struggling. The bishop on b7 is dead. It's just dead. It doesn't do anything and it's just struggling on b7. Mystery, thank you for the follow. So knight e6. Do we exchange ever when we have that pressure? Nope, we don't do that. We don't do that. So what should we play then if we're not exchanging? Knight f5. Very good. Knight f5. And the knight is slaloming to this juicy spot on d6. But that's not the only thing. There are many big problems there. The king. The king will be under heavy siege, and g6 is not too appealing because I have an h5 pawn that always puts pressure on the position. So if anything, that looks very dangerous. Something you don't want to deal with. So d4, strong move by Giri. You want to open up this bishop, and that's kind of the last hurrah he can go for. He's trying to activate that bishop before it's too late, before Carlsen gets the time to jump on that g7 pawn. However, this does have a drawback of activating this bishop on b3. Rook d3, knight c5, rook takes d4, rook takes, and sadly, you can't even go rook e5 because I have queen e5, and rook d8, soon to be checkmate. A very elegant solution. This pawn is taboo, so Giri took on b3. And these are, again, what kind of divides the players. An average player would take on b3 without a second thought. Just like immediately capturing back, you've got to capture back that piece, you gave up that bishop. However, grandmasters and super grandmasters note that yes, I could take on b3, I could go a takes b3, but do I have an even stronger move? So some things that are automatic for you isn't quite as automatic for GMs. So here comes queen g3, a very nice little move. You can't quite take, you get checkmated. And this is kind of pretty. Black can take multiple pieces, but it's all losing. So if you take, then this is kind of a similar version of the previous one. Get mated this way in the back rank. Now you can give a check, but it is merely a check. I can go king h2, and you still have to deal with that mate on g7. So g6, a takes b3. And again, sadly, those squares are still protected, so black still has a back rank threat. I mean, rook d8 is still an idea. Rook d8, but rook d8 runs into probably the most spectacular move of the game. It is white to move and win. e6, indeed, e6, very elegant move, again playing on the fact that if you take, it's back rank mate, and if you don't take, I still have this threat. I have e takes f7, knight h6 is a threat, and the pawn is rushing down the board to promote with a win. Queen c1 check, king h2, rook takes d4. However, rook takes d4 again invites an idea that makes it quite problematic for Giri. e7, of course. In fact, this is also winning, which is very astounding. Queen c8, takes, e7, and because you can go to e4, that is protected, you can go to d8. Oh, it's not winning. There's bishop d7 in this case. So again, that is something that you should remember, that yes, you're winning, but there's always room to mess it up. And in this case, you do not want to go the other direction, you just want to win the queen. Check, d4, e7. Running down the board, queen c8. And here comes the crème la crème, the coup de grâce. It is coming. The next move is probably the most spectacular one by Carlsen. By the way, good point by Fuxia. If you go queen c5, I can even go just b4. You no longer have this pin. If you take, I just take that rook. And apart from that, I still have the same ideas. So that's why he had to go this direction, e7, queen c8, and the big move, queen e5, yes. Which is very nice. You're setting up queen g7 checkmate, promotion, and knight h6 is also checkmate. So if you go here, you could even mate this way, because all of those critical squares are protected. So in fact, there's one, two, and a third way of winning, but only 2 ways to checkmate. Now that's a bit too much to handle. So here he played rook h4, and with style, king g3 was played. And you can defend against queening, mating, and promoting. And that kind of makes it beautiful. So this was a fantastic game by Magnus Carlsen. But as you've seen, psychology plays a role. Preparation plays a role. Knowing critical games. The one between Pologaevsky was important for P.H. Nilsson, one of the helpers of Magnus Carlsen. So it takes a lot of elements, a lot of these critical elements to make a good player. Chess history is your friend. Knowing all these critical topics is important. And in fact, chess psychology plays a role. If Giri wouldn't have believed him, probably he would have been still in the match right now and playing today. So probably Giri will have to work with the psychological issue with Carlsen, because on the board he was on one-on-one with Carlsen. And Magnus had some problems, and if he got the chance to use it, he would have won that last round game where Giri had an attack, but again, just at the last moment, he messed it up, and therefore Magnus clinched it. So that'll be all. This was a bit of a lecture, a little lecture on this topic. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you understood how much it matters to know chess history and some psychology to become a great player. So before I sign off, I am going to give out the raid to the legend. And again, if you guys want to join us on Discord, feel free to do so. We are always looking to see new people who enjoy it, new people who enjoy chess and anime as well. So if you're one of them, feel free to join us. And I think that in the future might do some lectures like this. This was particularly interesting for me because I was always interested in psychology and chess. So it felt kind of special to mix these two. And I think that was one of those critical reasons why this was such an intriguing match. Because not only chess preparation, not only banter, but psychology was involved. With that, I'm signing off. I hope you guys had a great time here. That I am leaving you guys. See you guys next time.